Today at 1, a red warning for extreme heat is in place for parts of England as temperatures are forecast to reach over 40 degrees this week. It means transport disruption and advice to travel only if absolutely necessary. We could have our hottest day on record with warnings of danger to life.
I would encourage people to heed the warnings that are out there. We have that balance where we might not see very much good weather and we want to enjoy it, but we're talking about temperatures that we've not experienced in this country ever.
French authorities warn of a heat apocalypse as thousands are forced to flee wildfires. Does climate change now mean regular severe heat waves?
Future warming is determined by future emissions. If we stop dumping carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, the world will stop warming.
We'll bring you all the latest on the impact of the heat wave. Our other main story this lunchtime. 5 will become 4. The latest round in the battle to become the next Prime Minister takes place later today.
And it's a 5th title! Unbelievable!
And a record 5th. Good afternoon and welcome to the BBC News at 1. The UK's first ever red warning for extreme heat has come into effect, meaning there's a danger to life and the threat of major travel disruption. The red alert covers much of England from London and the southeast up to York and Manchester. Parts of England could be hotter than the Western Sahara and the Caribbean. Tomorrow, temperatures could exceed 40 degrees in southern England, which would be a new record in Britain. An amber alert is also in place across England, Wales and parts of Scotland. Network Rail say that people should travel only if absolutely necessary, and some schools plan to close early or didn't open at all. Our correspondent Celestina Olulode has this report.
Not your usual morning offering at King's Cross Station. At 10:30 this morning, temperatures had already passed 30 degrees Celsius, which meant some trains were cancelled. Much of London Underground is already affected, with some lines running slower. Well, this is usually one of the busiest stations in the country, but not today, with many passengers following advice and avoiding travel. And tomorrow, there won't actually be any rail services from this station at all, as we're expecting even hotter temperatures.
Tomorrow I'll be working from home. So it hampers travel a bit, and also it takes away the magic of summer.
It looks like I might not get back to crew today because of the heat, and I won't get back tomorrow. No trains tomorrow.
I'm going to stay inside with the air conditioning, waiting for the thing to go quiet, and then go to the hotel in the evening. That's what I'm going to do.
A busy day for the ambulance service, with 8,000 calls expected today, up from an average of 5,500.
I would encourage people to heed the warnings that are out there. We have that balance where we might not see very much good weather and we want to enjoy it, but we're talking about temperatures that we've not experienced in this country ever, never mind for a long time. Our bodies, our houses, our culture, our way of life is just not geared up for it.
Which has led some schools to change plans.
It was supposed to be our sports day today, and we're going to do different sort of low energy things like den building, water painting. I've put some wet t-shirts in the freezer, and we're going to have a competition to see if the house captains can put a frozen t-shirt on. So just things like that will be fun, but a little bit calmer, and still have a slightly competitive element to them as well.
At this Lido, swimmers chose to cool down at a leisurely pace. But Thames Water has issued a warning.
We want people to stay hydrated. We want people to look after their health, particularly vulnerable customers. But please be careful with any sort of non-essential water use. At the moment, we're seeing record levels of demand, sort of in the order of 20 to 30% more water across the board. What that means is that in some cases, the demand for water is actually outstripping our ability to abstract, treat, and pump water into homes and businesses.
A quick splash in the pool and frozen treats to help these animals cool down.
Really look out for the signs and symptoms of heat stroke. If you do believe that your dog is showing any signs of heat stroke, then call your vet immediately, and that is whether or not they are vomiting, they've become lethargic, or any kind of change in behaviour that has you worried.
This is unprecedented heat, and of course these very high daytime temperatures we're expecting will make life Very uncomfortable for a lot of people. But it's not just the daytime heat, it's how uncomfortably warm it's going to be overnight, where temperatures don't drop below 20 degrees Celsius. Day, nighttime heat combined contributes to heat stress.
But with temperatures expected to peak tomorrow, we'll need to continue to adapt in order to cope. Celestina Olulode, BBC News.
Well, along with the red and amber heat alerts, there have been warnings that extreme temperatures will happen more regularly because of climate change. Periods of intense heat do occur within natural weather patterns, but scientists say they're becoming more frequent, more intense, and are lasting longer, as our climate correspondent Jonah Fisher reports.
The livestock at the Royal Welsh Show have been given fans and extra ventilation to help get them through the hot weather. Despite record temperatures being predicted for mid-Wales, organisers have decided to stay open and are expecting several hundred thousand people.
I think we've been slightly mistaken about the nanny stations on this one, but that's my own view. We've got extra shaded areas. We may have to change judging times a little bit, dependent on whatever happens, but the show will go on.
The advice for the next couple of days is, if you can, change your plans. But it's important to understand that this isn't a one-off, a freak weather event. It's something that we're going to have to get used to. For as long as our emissions continue to warm the planet, and at the moment temperatures are rising by 1/4 degree every 10 years, heat waves like this one are going to become more frequent and more intense.
This particular hot weather system has made its way north from southern Europe, where it's led to temperatures in the mid-40s and devastating forest fires. Climate change scientists say it will be no surprise to them if temperature records are broken across the UK.
Heat waves is one of the clearest signs in extreme weather of human influence on climate. It's one of the extreme weather events that we can be most confident about are being affected by rising global temperatures.
So is it too late for us to turn this around?
It's absolutely not too late, because future warming is determined by future emissions. If we stop dumping carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, the world will stop warming. It's that simple.
But rapid action to cut emissions has not proved simple politically. This heat wave is an uncomfortable reminder of how much still needs to be done. Jonah Fisher, BBC News.
Well, our transport correspondent Katie Austin is here with me. So, Katie, how is all this affecting our transport networks?
Well, our railway is engineered to run normally within a temperature range, an air temperature range of between about -10 degrees Celsius and about 30 to 35 degrees. The rails are made of steel, they get a lot hotter than the air, and when they get really hot, they expand. And the big risk there is that the track could buckle, and also the overhead power cables could also sag and be damaged as trains come through. So one way of reducing those risks is to run trains slower. So we currently have speed restrictions in place around the country, with trains running some of them at 90 miles per hour, some at 60 miles per hour, some as low as 20 miles per hour in the really vulnerable spots. And all this means delays and cancellations in some places, journeys taking longer. A lot of people have clearly heeded the advice to avoid rail travel. Things were a bit quieter than normal this morning. And looking ahead, Network Rail says, yes, there will be a need in future to change engineering standards to cope with the higher temperatures we're expecting. Now tomorrow there will also be speed restrictions starting earlier than they did today, and actually a large section of the East Coast main line between London and York and Leeds will be completely closed in the afternoon, with some operators on that route not running trains for the whole day. Now what about the roads? Well, drivers have been warned there could be more breakdowns in the heat, so they should avoid the hottest part of the day and make sure if they are going out, vehicles are prepared, for example, with enough coolant there. And the high temperatures have prompted fears that some road surfaces could even melt, and we've had some councils putting their gritters on standby so they could put sand out to try and help. But National Highways told me main roads are highly resilient to hot weather, and there have been no instances, they say, of road surfaces melting during the current high temperatures.
Katie, thank you very much. Katie Austin there. Well, let's get an update now on the picture around the UK. In a moment, we'll talk to our correspondent Howell Griffiths, Katie Hunter, who is in Scotland. But first, let's talk to our Wales correspondent Howell Griffith, who's in Builth Wells for us. Howell.
Yes, at the Royal Welsh Show, the biggest agricultural show in Britain. Has been postponed since 2019 because of the pandemic, but back this year with a bang and in sweltering conditions. Now, the forecast here in Builth Wells is for the temperature to reach 36 degrees, and if it does, that will be a new Welsh record. But in some parts of Wales, it could even creep up to 37, 38. While Wales is under an amber alert rather than red, there's still plenty of people taking precautions. As you might have seen in Jonah Fisher's report earlier, animal welfare is a big concern here. So sunscreen on the pigs, fans in the sheep pen. The humans too, I've seen plenty of people queuing for water, seeking shade. It may be that some people decide to postpone their visit from today until later in the week. They normally get around 50 to 60,000 people per day here. There's been so much anticipation that some people may want to wait a day or two. Elsewhere in Wales, well, temperatures have reached 33 degrees in West Wales. While there aren't so many train cancellations, the transport system has had to slow down to cope with today's heat.
Well, it's a relatively mild 28 degrees Celsius here in South Queensferry this lunchtime, and there is a bit of a breeze, so it's quite bearable. Now, the record temperature for Scotland is 32.9 Celsius. That was set way back in 2003 in the Scottish Borders, and forecasters think that that will be broken tomorrow. We have an amber warning for heat in place for the south of Scotland and parts of the east of the country up to Perth and Dundee. So although we don't have the red warning here, people are still being asked to take precautions, to drink lots of water, to stay in the shade and to check on vulnerable neighbours. Also a plea to people heading to the coast, heading to rivers and lochs to be careful. The weather is beautiful, but of course the water can be deceptively cold, and that can lead to cold water shock. Also, with regards to public transport, there will be some speed restrictions in place. ScotRail on the trains are saying there'll be speed restrictions in place from around 1 p.m. till 8 p.m. And just a final thought, this heat wave isn't affecting everywhere in Scotland today. It's a cool 14 degrees Celsius in Shetland.
Thank you for that. That's Katie Hunter reporting. Meanwhile, soaring temperatures also continue across southern Europe. France has evacuated more than 16,000 people threatened by wildfires in the southwest. And in Portugal and Spain, more than 1,000 deaths have been attributed to the heat in recent days. Our correspondent Bethany Bell has this report.
Wildfires continue to rage in France after days of intense heat. Emergency workers battled the flames. It's difficult and dangerous work. The French government is sending another 200 firefighters to the region. In northwestern Spain, a fireman died in action last night. Fires are causing widespread damage in Catalonia and several other parts of the country. In the hills around Malaga, a major tourist area, there's relief. Last night, a fire that had been blazing since Friday was finally brought under control. The fire destroyed big parts of the woods on top of this hill above the small tourist town of Mijas, which is not very far away from the beach resorts of the Costa del Sol. Around 3,000 people were evacuated here. Now they're returning to their homes.
More and more helicopters came in.
Yesterday, we met Yvonne and her daughter Charlotte just after they got back to their holiday villa.
We were by the pool for most of the day, and the fire looked as though it was very much under control with not a lot of smoke at all. And then later in the afternoon, the smoke just became black smoke very quickly. A huge like ball of fire went up, and the mountain just burst into flames, with the flames kind of running down the mountain towards us very, very quickly. It went from an in control situation to a very much out of control situation in a really short space of time.
With bone dry conditions in the countryside, the authorities remain on high alert. Bethany Bell, BBC News, Malaga.
Let's join our correspondent Jessica Parker, who's in southwest France for us. And Jessica, there's been a very grave warning from the authorities about the heat.
Yes, there has been. Obviously, temperatures soaring today, peaking over 40 degrees here while these wildfires continue. That, by the way, is a local evacuation centre. And we were here a couple of days ago when the air was clear, but today you can smell, you can taste the smoke as those wildfires continue to rage. The winds around here have been described as unstable and the fire spreading. We've just heard in the last hour that a further 5,000 people are set to be evacuated from the local area. Some of them will be coming straight here. And what the authorities are saying, it's because of the smoke, not because those villages or towns are at threat of the fire itself, but it's the smoke and the health risks around that. Further inland, another blaze in the area of Landiras. There are further evacuations there as well. Firefighters, of course, continuing to try and tackle these fierce blazes, but at the moment, this afternoon, here in southwestern France, the situation does feel quite volatile.
Thank you very much. Jessica Parker reporting there. The time is just after 1:15. Our top story this lunchtime. A red warning for extreme heat is in place for parts of England, causing widespread disruption as temperatures are forecast to reach over 40 degrees this week. And Ukraine's President Zelensky suspends his security chief and top prosecutor